The moment Megan Walker walked into the lavish downtown restaurant, she felt every eye in the room on her. Not because she was dazzling, not because she radiated confidence, but because she didn't belong there. Her worn coat smelled faintly of laundry soap, and her hands were calloused from working 2 jobs. Her long brown hair was pulled hastily into a ponytail, and beneath her tired eyes lay the weight of years spent surviving. She was a single mom struggling to keep her 8-year-old daughter, Abby, fed, clothed, and smiling. But tonight, she had been dragged into something that made her stomach twist with both dread and defiance, a blind date, set up by her co-workers as a cruel joke. They knew she would feel out of place among the glittering chandeliers and impeccably dressed patrons. They knew she would stumble over her words in front of someone wealthy, someone important, someone like the men she was about to meet. Her date, she had been told, was a CEO, a man named Jonathan Price. Jonathan Price was known in the city not just for his immense wealth but for his cold, solitary demeanor. Few knew the loneliness that gnawed at him each night, the relentless pressure that came with running a global company. Megan didn't care about any of that. She had bigger worries, bills that needed paying, homework that needed supervising, and a life that demanded her courage daily. But here she was, walking into a room where everyone assumed she was out of her league, their smirks barely hidden behind crystal glasses and polite smiles. Before I continue, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, or in the power of ordinary people to change extraordinary lives, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs inspiration, and subscribe to our channel. Megan tried to steady her nerves, smoothing down the threadbare scarf she had borrowed from her sister. She walked toward the table where Jonathan sat, a man who looked as intimidating as she had imagined. Broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, and with eyes that seemed to see through everyone, he sat quietly, waiting. When she arrived, he stood politely, offering a small, hesitant smile. Megan's hands trembled slightly, though she forced herself to return it with a polite nod. The dinner began with strained conversation. Jonathan asked polite questions about her work, her interests, her family. Megan answered honestly, but without embellishment, no grandiose stories, no pretense of wealth or status, only the life she had, the life she fought for every single day. She spoke of her late husband, who had died in a car accident 5 years ago, leaving her alone to raise Abby. She spoke of her jobs at the diner and the bookstore, her nights spent sewing Abby's costumes for school plays, her mornings making sure she had breakfast before school. Jonathan listened. He didn't laugh at the supposed joke. He didn't smile condescendingly. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully, his eyes softening with each story. There was a pause, almost imperceptible, when Megan mentioned how she volunteered at a shelter every Saturday, helping children who had nothing, just as Abby had once experienced. Jonathan's hand brushed the edge of his glass, a faint sigh escaping his lips. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not for his title, not for his wealth, not even for the image of control he projected, but for the man he was when he dared to be quiet and human. It was after the main course that the subtle shift happened. Megan had accidentally spilled water on the edge of the table, and the napkin she grabbed was soaked and useless. Without thinking, she tore a piece from her scarf, trying to dab at the mess. Jonathan's reaction surprised her. Instead of grimacing or recoiling, he chuckled softly, leaning over to help. "Let me," he said. The simple act, so ordinary, pierced through the barrier Megan had built around herself. She had been so used to judgment, ridicule, and sneers that genuine kindness felt almost surreal. The night stretched on, conversations flowing more freely. Megan's humor, her warmth, her resilience, began to shine through, and Jonathan's barriers started to crack. She didn't know about the prank, and neither did she sense the skepticism lingering in the minds of her co-workers, who had expected her to fail spectacularly. But as she recounted a particularly funny story about Abby's school play, a disaster involving a costume, glitter, and a runaway rabbit, Jonathan laughed. Not the polite chuckle reserved for social niceties, but a deep, authentic laugh that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. And in that moment, Megan realized she wasn't being judged. Not here. Not now. After dinner, Jonathan suggested they walk along the city's riverfront. The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain and the soft hum of the city's nightlife. Megan's coat was thin, and Jonathan, noticing her shiver, offered his jacket. She hesitated but accepted, grateful for the warmth and the unexpected gesture of care. They walked side by side, talking about everything and nothing, books, dreams, childhood memories, the quiet fears that often went unspoken in the lives of busy people. Megan found herself opening up in ways she hadn't allowed herself for years. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt free to be herself, without shame, without worry about judgment. It was then that the cruel twist revealed itself. Megan's co-workers, who had been following from a distance, thought they could capture her discomfort on camera for amusement. But as they peered from the shadows, they saw something entirely different. Jonathan, usually unreadable and distant, was leaning in, completely captivated. Megan's courage, her authenticity, her generosity of spirit, it had not only neutralized the intended humiliation but had drawn a man of influence and means toward a genuine connection. The next morning, Megan returned to her modest apartment, exhausted but exhilarated. She couldn't stop thinking about Jonathan, not the CEO, not the man of wealth, but Jonathan, the human being who had laughed, listened, and seen her. She wondered if the magic of that evening could last in the real world, outside of restaurants and riverfronts. And then, a message appeared on her phone, a simple, heartfelt note from Jonathan, thanking her for an evening that had reminded him of what truly mattered in life. He didn't mention money, status, or appearances. He mentioned kindness, laughter, courage, and truth, the qualities Megan had brought effortlessly to the table. Over the following weeks, their connection deepened. Megan continued her life of struggle and sacrifice, but Jonathan began to help in ways she hadn't expected, not to rescue her, but to walk beside her. He volunteered at the shelter with her, listening and learning. He supported Abby's school projects, not with grandeur but with genuine interest. And through it all, Megan never lost her humility, never let wealth or privilege change her essence. She remained the same resilient, compassionate woman who had walked into that restaurant with nothing but honesty and heart. One day, Jonathan surprised her with a gesture that was both practical and profoundly symbolic. He helped fund a small scholarship program in Megan's name at the local school, providing support for children who, like Abby, had parents struggling to make ends meet. Megan cried when she heard the news, not for herself, but for the countless kids who would now have a chance to dream, a chance she had fought so hard to preserve for her own daughter. Megan's story spread quietly through the city, not as gossip or spectacle, but as inspiration. She had turned a moment intended for humiliation into a testament to human dignity and resilience. She had not only changed her own life but had reminded a lonely man, and eventually a community, that compassion and courage could alter the course of destiny. Years later, when Megan looked back on that night, she realized it had been less about the prank and more about the choices she made. She could have shrunk, allowed herself to be embarrassed, and walked away feeling small. Instead, she had embraced her truth, her struggles, and her heart. And in doing so, she had sparked a transformation, not just for herself, but for Jonathan, for Abby, and for countless others touched by their story. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that courage, kindness, and authenticity can change lives in ways you never imagined, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps spread hope to someone who may need it today. Before you leave, I'd love for you to comment below. Have you ever experienced a moment where your honesty or kindness completely changed someone's perception of you? I can't wait to read your stories. Megan's life wasn't perfect. Challenges continued, and the struggle remained. But that one night, the night that began as a cruel joke, became the night that proved resilience and authenticity could illuminate even the darkest corners of life. She had been set up to fail, but what she did instead changed everything, for herself, for Jonathan, and for everyone who would hear their story and dare to believe that the smallest acts of courage can ripple through the world, transforming hearts and lives in ways no one ever anticipated.